Okay.
Right, 1 second. Okay, let's go. All right, guys, I'm here with Paddy O'Gorman. He is a veteran broadcaster in Ireland. So he's been on the radio, he's been on TV. He was an you've been on RTÉ, Paddy, which is like Ireland's
That's right.
equivalent of the BBC.
Yeah, it's the
Um,
semi-state. It's funded by a license fee. Yes, I gave
yeah,
5 years.
yeah, and you've also got a podcast as well. What's the name of your
It's
podcast?
called Paddy's Podcast. I think I was
Paddy's
born.
podcast, and
Yeah.
I heard this for the first time maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I was absolutely fascinated because you went outside a prison in Ireland. Was it Killarney Prison?
No, Limerick.
Limerick Prison. Okay,
Yeah.
and I'd never heard of this person before, but you've been following this story because you've been to his court cases, and
Yes.
it's the guy that calls himself Barbie Kardashian. Now, if I'm correct, his real name is Gabriel
Cantile.
Alejandro Gentil.
Gabriel Alejandro Cantile. I was speaking with him. He speak habla español because I speak Spanish too, and I was able to establish that like he's from his family are from Venezuela, but I think he was born in Ireland, grew up in Ireland, but from a young age he was involved. He's I think 23 now. So, but as a teenager, he ended up going into various juvenile institutions because of extreme sexualized violence he was showing against women in general and his mother in particular. And from what we know, if you look at the transcripts when he was still juvenile, he'd had a horrific upbringing, that he was sexually abused himself. And that's what, if that's all true, that what we heard, and I feel it is. But I got to know about it because I started podcasting 3 years ago now, and I wasn't that conscious about the whole gender thing. But then I started hearing about this thing they're doing. What? They're putting men in women's prisons. And as I would come to hear, like equally bad, in my opinion, putting men in women's domestic violence refuges. It's surreal, Steve. It just is
Yeah.
happening. So I used one of my usual tactics. I just stood outside Limerick Prison, which is a women's section and a men's section. I stood outside Limerick Prison for a few hours. And if you stand outside a prison, you will meet people. I'm doing it actually this week. I'm going to get a podcast up out from outside Mountjoy Prison in Dublin, which is both men and women's sections as well.
Paddy, just a quick one. Can I just stop you 1 second, mate? I think something's tapping on your microphone because it's making a bit of distortion.
I wonder where is the microphone on these things? Where does it exist on these?
What is it you've got? Have you got a phone?
No, I've got a I can use the phone as well if you like. Would that help? I've got a laptop, a Mac.
Oh right, okay.
Is the microphone here? Can you hear me all right, or is the microphone? I don't quite know where the microphone is on this thing.
Right, there's just a bit of distortion, so something is tapping on it.
I
that's
think
all.
Possibly, yeah. It was rubbing on my shirt or something.
Right.
How is that now? Is that okay? Do you think? I'll try not to.
Yes, that is better.
That okay.
Yeah.
All right. So will I go back to what I was saying? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So to find out what goes on in a prison, if you stand outside a prison for a few hours, you'll meet people who are signing on, as they say, and that is people who say they've got so many years of a sentence. They're allowed out the last year, but they're required to sign on once a week. So you will meet people who've been up until recently prisoners in there, and you'll meet people who are visiting who are prisoners, and you'll meet people, the ones coming out with a plastic bag and looking very happy. They're just released. So you'll meet all of those people in a day. My podcast, by the way, this week, which I'll put up in the next 2 or 3 days, is from outside Mountjoy Prison in Dublin. And there's a young London woman comes out, she's got a bag over her back and gives me a very frank interview about what the prison was like, There's no men in that one, by the way, right now.
Right, okay.
In Dublin. But I was standing outside the women's prison in Limerick. I was meeting women, and they're women ex-prisoners telling me that there was 3 blokes in there at this stage. One was this guy, Barbie Kardashian. Another is a child abuser who the newspapers reported as a woman who was busting his boy for 2 years and threatening him horribly. And who was the guy, sex offender. He was in for a number of serious assaults on men. All 3 of those men, in the course between the time they were and the time they were coming to sentencing, the judge told My client is a woman, has a gender certificate, which you can get in Ireland for, I think it's €15 or something. You get it, and all you have to do is say, I promise to live as a man or live as a woman, whatever it is, and you get it. It's how gender self ID works. And so all three of these men, when they came to sentencing, the judge in each case sent them to the women's section of the prison in Limerick. Okay, now, there was those of us who said this is a bad idea, and we were told no problem. But I was getting the evidence from the women that they were being subjected to horrendous verbal, sexualized harassment. Now, before Barbie was there, the child abuser guy, I've had evidence from him as well. Same kind of thing. There was a nice young woman I met, and she'd gone in for a week for begging. Again, like time and again, her mom and dad had been drug addicts. People like that have a rotten start in life, time and again,
Yeah.
sure. And when she was mopping the landing, next thing she hears this whispering of highly sexualized stuff coming out from the cell door because he's looking out through his peephole at her. And as that woman said to me, men are stronger than women are.
Yeah.
These guys are there. But what happened with Barbie is, you couldn't believe what you heard. I'd actually been told by the women some of the stuff. In fact, I'd had to redact some of the stuff. I don't have to now because it was so horrific that I couldn't prove it. And I know people like Barbie is very well connected. The National Women's Council, all sorts of non-governmental organizations, very well funded, who are only waiting for people like me to put a foot wrong, But Barbie, when I started putting pressure on the prison by sending them this evidence that women were being abused, and that was in November 22. I started doing that. By January of 23, Barbie picked up his first charges, and he for making threats to kill and otherwise and to rape two women in there. One of them was a prisoner, and the other was a female prison officer. He picked up 4 such charges, and by April, the Minister for Justice took an executive decision, took him out of the women's section of the prison and put him in somewhere where there's no women, some other section, as he tells me now, the men's section. But I don't think he wasn't seeing too many men either. But so when he got those charges, I went to his court case last October, a year ago now, and I sat in the court for the week listening to this horrendous evidence. But the most shocking day was the last day when Barbie himself was called to give evidence.
Right.
And he didn't hold back on anything. I thought the defense solicitor would be holding his head in his hands saying, oh, wow, this guy's and I mean, defense prosecution, no, Miss Kardashian. They all keep up a fiction that it's a woman who's been making all these rape threats and all. How did you think you might rape these women, Well, I thought I might. And as one of the witnesses said, they know his slightly American accent. I thought I might use a mop pole handle, or I would sexually electrocute their genitalia. It was horrific. Now, what came over that jury, I don't know. I got the train back to Dublin that afternoon, and I was arriving into Dublin by tea time once the jury had retired. And my wife texts me, says Barbie is innocent on all charges, So I mean, I will never ever understand that. The guy stood there, confirmed every damn thing that was said against him, what he'd been saying to the prison officer, and what he said on my podcast, he'd already said in court. But when he came out of court and when he came out of the prison there last week, I was the first person he met. He said the same things again. I said to him, Barbie, wasn't it? Do you agree that it was? Do you regret making those threats to rape those women? I'm only regret that I never carried it out. They criticized me for the way I was using the shower. And you saw it in his court case. There was the E-wing or Echo Landing. There was a female prisoner in E1 cell. Barbie's next door in E2. The paedophile, who they claim was another female prisoner, is in E3, but I recognize the name. It is. And then the shower unit, you see, was at the end of the E-wing. So these women knew as they were going by to use the shower, they had male sex offenders looking out at them, calling out sexualized. It's just cruel and unusual punishment. Now, I was bringing this to the attention of the authorities for the last 3 years, and I'm getting all of the trans rights, not just the trans rights activists, but the politicians. They were dismissing the evidence or pretending it didn't happen. I was lying, the women were lying, whatever. Mainly just tried to ignore it because I was a very, very difficult person. I canvassed my old company, RTÉ, to please take up this. No, nobody will touch it. I was told it's toxic.
Why do you think? I was just going to ask, why wouldn't they touch it?
Why wouldn't you touch it? And journalists meant to touch stuff that's toxic. Isn't that what journalists are supposed to do? So I
Yeah.
mean, that's in a way that's what shocked me the most about this whole thing, is the abuse of the women was one thing, but the media, the journalists who broke their necks this last few years, looking the other way rather than touch this. So that's what, in a way, is so wonderful about Barbie, that he is so blatant about everything. He will perform, and so he's a real problem. That now, because of him, now I tried to publicize his court case. It got some publicity, but when he came out and he spoke, that's gone everywhere now, and
Yeah.
people can see those women weren't lying. You know, this guy really makes serious sexualized threats. And so that has kind of put it onto the agenda now, that nobody can anymore say that, oh, actually, they weren't telling the truth. I mean, I would love these feminists, unfortunately, love the columnists. There's not a single newspaper columnist in Ireland is critical of the gender, the transgender agenda. There's when Graham Lenihan was arrested there a few weeks back, the Irish media reported it as a news item, and that was it. There was hardly any analysis, apart from the Irish Times giving the usual, this man who attacks trans people, and there's been attacks on Lenihan, and that's it. But there hasn't been a single piece saying, actually, is it a good idea? Maybe the guy has a point, or whatever. So that has actually shocked me as much. So Barbie, as you can say, he's quite shocking. And people, obviously, I'm being attacked now, saying it's a case of, oh, you exposed a mentally ill person to this. Sorry, folks, you're the ones who's been making sure that women have been exposed to this. And then the journalists, they're all, oh, you must respect the pronouns. For God's sake. Well, I think now, and there were these two journalists from, I think it was the Sunday World, and they're putting up videos of themselves about how we're so much better than that online media. And there's one guy, he's saying, look, if you interviewed a person about flower arranging or fly fishing, and then they tell you they want to be known by certain pronouns, it's just basic politeness. I said, hang on, lads, rape and rape threats are not flower arranging. And so when a man makes a rape threat, it is surely far more real than a woman. Even at Barbie's trial last year, defense had the one of the prisoners up, and he says to her, how do you know you couldn't see who was shouting in the door at you? How do you know it was Miss Kardashian? How do you know it wasn't another woman threatening to rape you? Like, the whole thing is so surreal. And she answered, well, she says, I know Barbie's American accent,
Right, and that's the only thing that they could use.
But actually, if you're in the women's prison, the one who's shouting in the door threatening to rape you,
It's got to be a man.
It's got to be a man. I mean, Steve, you're a younger man than I am, but honest to God, I just can't believe the way this collective agreement on pretending we see the clothes on the emperor. I think the old Hans Christian Andersen story or whatever really is opposite here. If you break the spell, it falls away. So, like, with theirs, you've got seasoned journalists pretending that this guy still is a woman. I'm trying to remember, but if a man gets a GRC, a general gender recognition certificate, how many women does he have to rape, I wonder, before they'll consider, well, maybe actually he is really a man, So, it's been an eventful week for me, but I'm glad, like, you're picking up on it and other people are, which is great,
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, it was fascinating. Now, has there been any comeback towards Barbie Kardashian based on what he said to you outside the prison? Because he said that there were certain people, particularly the prison governor and his mother, that are, and his father, that they should be. I can't remember his exact words, but they're the only people that are in danger. He was at it. Nobody else is in danger, even though going to the women's toilets. But these people should be worried. I'm paraphrasing a bit because he wants to kill them.
As you can imagine, the Garda Síochána, that's the police force in Ireland, they came back to me on it, and I spoke to them at length, and they're conscious of those threats. I'm not sure. Barbie's mum and dad mightn't be in Ireland anymore. I don't know, but. Obviously, the prison governor is findable. And the person I was particularly worried for was the prison officer who he's threatened to rape. And I was asking him,
Yeah.
is that rape threat now lifted? And he wouldn't say, no, well, the priority is killing 3 people before he gets around to raping the 2 people who he regrets not having raped. And even at the time when that jury acquitted him last year, presumably on the grounds that the threat wasn't credible. That's the only grounds I can think that was in the
Right.
jury room that was there, because he did make the threats.
Yeah.
But that's all very well. Like that prison officer, she's living in the community in
Mm.
Limerick. She's at home. She has an address, the other prisoner, she is also actually in Limerick. And I'll tell you, she's out at the moment. I don't know if she's on temporary release or did she finish her sentence? I don't know. But I'm at the side of the road with Barbie, and he's there saying, I'm not a threat to anybody. Next thing, somebody shouts, Hi, Barbie, from a passing car. And he jumps up. He says, That's Tegan McGee. I want to rape her. I want to rape her. I want to rape her with an object. Because I'm a woman, I rape with an object. The guy is truly bloody scary, do you know?
Yes. And
I just, yeah, go on, yeah.
I couldn't believe the detail that he went into as to when he's going to have the surgery and then the type of careers that he's going to pursue after the surgery. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit from
Yeah,
what he said to
I
you?
saw that. I actually interviewed another of the ex-prisoners, but I've never published that for a number of reasons. He started making all sorts of preconditions. This guy wasn't a sex offender, but like that, he's planning surgery. Do you notice it's always in the future these guys
Yeah.
are going to get surgery? I don't know. And now, because he's a gay man, this other guy, and that's fine. He's a gay man, but no, I'm now a heterosexual woman, and my husband's a straight man. I said, oh,
Yeah.
you're my boyfriend. Yeah, so if you broke up with him, he'll go find another woman. Lads, it is that I think there is a strong amount of like homophobia that is being preached into these guys.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I said to this guy in Dublin, I said, look, let me tell you, if you get this operation and you get your genitals reshaped in this way and whatever, I'm not going to be attracted to you,
Yeah.
But it is their great fantasy is to have sex with straight men. And this fantasy, I think, is behind it. Not with all guys who want to do this to themselves, but with these guys, it's a great fantasy that men are going to want to have sex with them.
Yeah.
And they've been lied to by the doctors to tell them they can be women if they want
Yeah.
to be. You can be a woman. They've been lied to by the legislators. They've been lied to by the journalists. They've been lied to by the politicians. Everybody's lying to these men saying you can be a woman if you want to be, and it's only bigots. We're lying to kids in school now, telling them that you can choose, you may be a different gender and whatever. And I try to think like, I was born 68 years ago in Pinner in northwest London, and my mom and dad would have been asked, what name would you want to assign him? And they said Paddy or Patrick, which reflected my London Irish background.
Yeah.
They didn't ask what date of birth do you want to assign.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and they didn't say what sex do you want to assign. Everybody knows this is true, but this collective fantasy I find really shocking that's going on. Steve, well, I told you the other front I've worked on, other than the prisons, then is the women's homeless hostels. Which has been just as shocking. It was in April of 23, and I make podcasts like I'm at social welfare offices sometimes. Just stand outside. I would have done it all around Britain. I would have done it in Manchester, go to the DSS in Ancoat Street, Great Ancoat.
Yeah.
Where are you from yourself, Steve? Your accent is from...
I'm actually South Manchester, Stockport.
Stockport, yeah. I made a television program in Stockport one time, down outside Fred Doan's bookie shop. We stayed there for a day, and there's a big pub there. It was called Fiddler's Green. Lovely Donegal couple.
Right.
I think it was called Fiddler's Green, yeah. So we got to meet a lot of elderly Irish people on the Stockport Road, But so I've always had this technique of just stand, see what happens. So I'm standing outside a particular welfare office in Dublin that deals with homelessness and housing. And it also happens to be the one that prisoners are sent to on their first release from prison. They come out the prison gates or the prison gates. Maybe it's a 10-minute walk from Mountjoy. And you'd see them because they have the plastic bag with them with their clothes in it. And this young woman, I waited till she came out with the bag, and I said, hi. Oh, yeah, she says, I'm just out. And she spoke very eloquently about prison. As happens time and again, people actually say far more positive things about their prison experience than you get from, these kind of prison reform people who are always looking for more funding, whatever. But she spoke about how they, dealing with her drug problem and all that, And then we were chatting, and I said I was down at Limerick Prison. I said to her, "Do you know they have trans-identified men in Limerick Prison?" She says they have them in the hostels now. What? Yeah, in the women's hostels. And she was in one in Rathmines in Dublin. Now that was it was known as the battered wives home traditionally. 40 years ago,
Right.
it was. I
Yeah.
think it was the first place. Because Ireland was pretty conservative in those days, and the idea that women should have somewhere safe to go if they're getting beaten up by their husbands. Oh, this was an attack on the family. I imagine if you tried to do it in Tehran today, you'd probably find
Yeah.
Muslim women having a similar problem. But this was a refuge from men, from violent men. What happened? It was one of the blokes who was in Limerick Prison when he was released, having been in the women's section of Limerick Prison. This is a guy who was in for 3 serious assaults on men. Okay, he's a big bloke and a big
Yeah.
mane of hair, blonde hair, which women tell me is not real hair. What are they called? Extensions, actually. Women know
Yes.
these things. Okay, and but it was a 60-year-old woman of slight stature. He lost his temper with. He beat her to the ground, ripped the hair from her head, punched her repeatedly. He got thrown out. The women obviously had to intervene, fighting with him. And she'd been saying to me, and I've heard this too, this guy's going around with G-strings.
Yeah.
And I spoke to him about this afterwards. And one of these, well, why shouldn't I wear a G-string? I'm a woman, whatever. And of course, they're demented, like these guys. But women are having this inflicted on them. And
Yeah.
okay, now I'm told there was only one recorded incident that led to a criminal prosecution. Yeah, but if you put violent man in among women, the threat is there all the time. That was the whole point of a women's refuge, is that if there was going to be a fight, it would only be between women. But anyway, this guy, when his case came to court a full year later, in September of 2023, what did our newspapers do? Woman gets 3 months suspended sentence for attack on woman in refuge.
Yeah.
Now by that time he was back in prison again for another assault. He was in the women's section of Mountjoy at this stage, although he was being kept fairly isolated, will tell me. But
Right.
our newspapers, our journalists, they decided to bury the lead on this one. Like a woman fights with woman in homeless hostel, that's dog bites man. That's what happens.
Yeah.
You get roused. The real story was that a man beat up a woman in the refuge. And what did our journalists do? They just looked the
Yeah.
other
They
damn
just
way.
flipped it.
And so
Yeah.
that has shocked me very deeply. And I've collected further evidence on that. There's another guy going around. I'm not quite sure what French knickers are, but they wouldn't exactly. My understanding is, there he is in French knickers with his effing thing sticking out. But these guys, all right, they have their fetish. But there are housing authorities, in this case, Dublin Regional Homeless Executive, which is an arm of Dublin City Council, is inflicting fetishistic men in mixed sex dormitories.
Yeah.
And even when I wrote to the hostel in Rathmines about, I said, you had a fight in there. This was before the guy was criminally prosecuted, and they said we are dedicated to looking after all women, and women of the LGBTQ, etc., are among the most marginalised and vulnerable.
They're victims.
They're victims, yeah. And therefore, and fights in a hostel are only to be expected. Well, of course they are. There will be fights. They can be tough places. There's people with drink and drug problems, mental illness. Tensions will be there, of course. But the whole point of having a women's refuge was that if those fights happened, they were between women, not men on women. And everybody knows this, Steve. There was a woman there, Christine. I put her on a podcast again because just the way she put it about being beaten up, she said, "I've been an effing punch bag all my life," she says. Which is when a man's fist hits your jaw, you feel your jaw, you feel your cheek break. It's the power of a man's fist.
Of
You know
course.
that. I know that. We all know a fist fight between a man and a woman isn't an even contest. We all know that.
Yeah.
How is it? We are pretending. And I got this, like, I think it was Andrew Doyle called it the Rip Van Winkle feeling, that you fell asleep for for 20 years or 100 years or whatever it was, and you wake up like, and the world has changed. It's just, I'm just knocked out by it. So
Yeah.
how are you?
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
What attracted you into this? Just shocked as I am.
Quickly, yeah. Well, I saw it. This for me is the long march through the institutions, and I saw it creeping into my institution, which was the fire service. And I just thought it was so mad that the appearance policy used to be like, oh, you used to have to be smart as a firefighter, polish your shoes, iron your uniform, don't have facial hair because you're breathing apparatus, things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they changed the policy, and it was written by these people coming from the universities and adopting managerial positions. And the appearance policy was, you can come into work and identify as whatever gender you want, and then you can use the appropriate facilities. And I'm thinking, this is fucking crazy. And then I'm a sportsman. I've always done different sports, combat sports, fitness related sports, powerlifting. And I'm seeing men enter, these mediocre men entering these women's sports. And I thought, that's fucking crazy. And then, winning all the trophies. They couldn't, they wouldn't even place in against other men. And I thought, that's not right. And I did some more digging, and I thought, I've got to do something about this. And then I started to learn about all the legislation. Now, what I want you to talk to me about is the Gender Recognition Act. It came into the UK in 2004. I'm not sure if it was the same time in Ireland, but what they
in Ireland, yeah.
Was it okay? But so it was earlier in the rest of in the UK. But what they haven't managed to get in the UK is self-identification. But they've been able to get that through in Ireland,
Yes.
haven't they? And that's where a lot of this stems from. Do you want to talk us a little bit about that and how it actually got into Ireland? Did it happen without the knowledge of the general public?
It did, because people like me fell down on the job. I was a working journalist at the time. No, I was covering a lot of crime stories at the time, but I just didn't see the importance of it when it came in 2015. There was a sort of general mood of we had decriminalized homosexuality in I forget, I think it was 93. There was kind of a long march, if you like,
Yeah.
of it. Ireland had got the liberal agenda won in Ireland through the 1990s and into the noughties. Eventually, same-sex marriage came in. I think it was 2013 or so that people of the same sex could marry each other. You'd had that in Britain for a long time. In the Republic of Ireland, we have a written constitution. So that means there has to be a referendum on a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff, law changes have to be put to the public. So there had to be a referendum on that. And it was carried about 2-1 or 3-1 even. I think that the mood of the public was, look, we've emerged from our very conservative Catholic past, and now we're much more liberal people. All of which was, I think, good. And if people of the same sex want to marry each other, we'll recognise that. Fine. Then, at the same time, or within a few months, the Gender Recognition Act went through, and it allowed for self-ID, and I can tell you there was virtually no public debate on it, and people just thought, oh yeah, this is like people. You see, nobody ever cared about men putting on dresses or women who dressed in traditionally male way. Why would anybody care? I still don't care, Steve. Nobody cares. But we didn't see it coming that what this was actual legal recognition that legally a person could change sex. And they get a new birth cert. Barbie sent me a copy of his birth cert. He is now down as he is born a woman. You can now get a new birth cert. You get a faked sex and on your birth cert for all purposes. That's what happened with the gender recognition certificates. And I'm looking now. There's people doing the homework on this at this stage. There was like discussions at government department levels about should it apply to sports, and the various transgender lobby groups said absolutely it applies to sports. And the civil servants, whatever, and the politicians just caved in on that, and it went through. And so you have it now. The like of those men, they are legally women. And that is why they got sent to women's prisons. Now, the prison actually had to look at reality in the end and took the like of Barbie out and put him in. Would he have a legal case? I don't know. I don't know, but that's how it went through. But I say the media generally was either asleep on the job or quietly complicit. And I didn't do anything about it. Now, I was in RTÉ at that stage. They wouldn't let me near. I had a bit of long history because going back 30 years ago, I'm old enough to have worked in Africa before they started calling everything AIDS, you know?
Yeah.
That so where everybody said it's all sex, these people are having too much sex. I said, no, actually, what you're looking at here is poverty, and I still believe that. I believe that HIV is very much concentrated in risk groups, and I mean
Yeah.
it's overwhelmingly obvious. So I was a homophobe, you know, so I was well known as a homophobe, and I was called a homophobe because I'm trying to looking at a gay man as about 50 times more likely to be HIV infected than than an average member of the public. And I actually even think that, I'm just going on the figures, but even that understates it, in my opinion, because I think a lot of straight gay men call themselves straight men. And in Ireland, the way we're corrupting the data now, gay men can, or a man can call himself a woman. So what we're seeing in recent years in Ireland is a surge in or an increase in HIV infections in women.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And the medical profession, just like the journalist profession, has gone along with it, gone along with the whole thing. And it has infected, if you like, the medical. I got one little victory there 3 years ago. I've been giving blood all my life. 2022, I went to give blood, and I just retired from RTÉ, have more time on my hands, and I'd never seen anything like the questionnaire before. It was all in
Go on.
trans-inclusive language, and there was one particular question says, "This is for cisgender men, women, cis women, whatever." And then it was I can't remember the exact words, but it says, "Have you actually have you?" There was a gross typo in it. Have you been pregnant within the last 6 months? And I wrote back to them and I said, what is a pregnant transgender man? What's a pregnant transgender woman? And what's the difference between them? You know? And they wrote back saying it was 2 or 3 letters backwards and forwards. And then when I actually copied and pasted what you're asking me, they caved immediately, and it was a complete full apology. Dear Paddy,
Right.
we have now removed it. So, and they did remove this thing, and it should have made news. The Times of London took it up, the Irish edition, but nobody would touch the fact that they'd had to change this. So on social media, it was there. Gript Media, who I write for now, sometimes they took it up because they will cover stories that the mainstream media won't go for. But it just showed the way that the doctors themselves didn't know what they were asking people. You know, you hear stuff saying, "Oh, suppose there's somebody with a poor education or English mightn't be their first language, whatever. How will they be confused by it?" The doctors simply caved into this transgender stuff, a bit like you in the fire service, that this managerial class come in and they put in all of this language that they themselves don't understand what it means. So I did win that little victory. But if you look at it still, the whole thing, because I still write on HIV and AIDS. I'm looking at it like the way that this trans-inclusive language has actually rendered it's corrupted the data at this
Yeah.
stage. It's increasing the number of
There's,
women who have HIV. I mean,
and also a massive increase in violence from women, and a
that's
massive
right.
increase
Oh,
in
the
rapes
women's
from women.
crimes, yeah. Like that in Limerick, this bloke, when he, this that the paedophile who was actually in cell E3, I think it was, next door to Barbie, he was described in our newspapers as this woman who had been sexually abusing her partner's little boy between the age of 3 and age of 5, threatened the little boy that she would pull his arms off if he told anybody. And our journalists use female pronouns throughout.
Yeah.
The women in the prison know. The women in the prison know. Women in damn well it's a man with a man's fist on them is different to that of a woman. The prison know a man for rape. You know? So you get a lot more wisdom once you stay outside of the media and kind of official channels. It's really, really sad. And
Well, yeah,
that's why people are migrating to online platforms such as your one here or mine or whatever, because the media is just disgracing itself,
yeah,
letting the public down.
yeah. That's it.
Right,
There's been a massive rise in independent, I suppose you would call them either freelance or citizen journalists,
yes,
because
indeed.
we don't
There
have to
has
put a
been.
flight on it. We will call it as it is. And we are the media now. We are the media, not
Yeah,
the people
yeah.
have lost all this faith in these big institutions.
Yeah, I was ashamed of my old company RTE a few weeks ago there. There was a horrible story from Minnesota in the USA that a gunman went into a church and he opened fire on little children. He killed two
Yes.
small children.
Yeah, I
And
remember.
he guns down, I think, another 10 or 12 and three adults or whatever, some of them seriously injured, but two little kids were killed. It
Yeah,
was memory hold in Ireland. And why? Because I'm looking at my own company, RTE. The website managed to not use any gendered pronouns on this
yeah,
guy. They actually had gunman, and then they took that out and put in shooter.
right.
So, like, with news, basic news, say a man is killed in a car accident. It's basic, man killed in a car accident. That's what you say. No, RTE, my old company, decides to not include the sex of the person because, of course, their problem was it was a trans identified man. He had a certificate that said he was a woman, and that they didn't actually call him a woman as the rest of the Irish media did, but they got around it by not saying anything at all about the sex of the
Yeah,
person. The Irish media didn't include a photograph of him, even though there was plenty of photographs of this guy available. So, like, the right of the public to know what was going on takes second place to the demands of the transgender lobby that the public must be fed a particular line. That's disgraceful.
yeah,
And, like, obviously the public is going to look, and they're going to look at RTE and say, why is it letting us down? The people don't believe RTE anymore. And then they're setting up this stuff. We have it in Ireland now. All sorts of legislation being planned to regulate online media, disinformation coming from, they're
yeah. They've
pompous.
set themselves up as the arbiters of the truth
They
when we know
just,
they lie.
when we know they lie. It's incredible. And this is so, like, they're going to use now hate speech. We don't know. We saw our government, our justice minister, just the other day stand up to the EU on hate speech, insofar as he says Ireland has already enacted sufficient, whatever, to go along with the EU directives on this. But this hate speech thing is still on the books. It had to be dropped last time because there was a few independent-minded senators. We have a like it's like the upper house of the Irish legislature, and some of those were asking very pertinent questions about what is hate, and that saved people like me from hate speech laws. But they're
Right.
there now. Their response is, if Paddy O'Gorman actually reports it was a trans-identified man killed those children, what we have to do is silence him, call it
Yeah,
disinformation. Paddy O'Gorman reports, and it's not just me, there's other brave people doing it. Paddy O'Gorman reports women getting intimidated and beaten inside women's domestic violence refuges by men. Wow. Well, we have to suppress that as well.
hmm,
And say, God bless Barbie. He is so over the top that he has to be noticed, and say, God, this is what women were enduring when they were in the prison. But it's a hell of a fight at this stage. That what we
yeah,
might be facing.
yeah. I've and Barbie Kardashian just wants the publicity.
Oh,
You
he
know,
loves it.
he's
Yeah,
he's set up an X account now with his phone number on
I
there,
saw
with his
that.
email on there and stuff. And I've actually considered reaching out and speaking. I'm a little bit
Oh, he'd be
torn.
delighted. Yeah.
I'm a little bit torn as to whether he should be platformed
I
or
know.
whether people need to know about him because it
I
shows
know.
how crazy this agenda is. So
Yeah.
I'm a little bit like this, what to do yet.
Yeah. You're right.
So
You're right. Yeah. Is that, like, I felt when he came out and said all those things, I had to put it out there
yeah,
because I've been
absolutely.
dealing
And
for 3 years. I've been dealing with people saying it's not happening. So that was important to put it out
yeah,
there. I think. Yeah.
I'm erring on the side of actually reaching out to him and speaking to him because what you did outside that prison when you went and spoke to him, what he revealed was just so crazy that
Yeah.
that's what got me involved. And I'm thinking people need to know about this, and that's what got me to reach out to you. Now I've
Yes.
got one
Yeah.
one $1 million question for you. Where do you think all this agenda is coming from? And you can be as conspiratorial as you like. Put your tinfoil hat on if you need to, but I don't think I've worn one for a long time, but I think it's almost out there now
Yeah.
anyway. It's not that conspiratorial, but I'd love to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts on it.
Well, my first thought is I am absolutely bewildered. The thing has come from, I don't understand where it's come from. And just the other day now, I was talking to a woman, and she was an unusual person to be visiting the prison because I'm making a podcast outside Mountjoy now. Insofar as very middle class, kind of out there with a lot of things. And she said to me, well, what's going on with the transgender thing? Everything was fine until this far right American stuff started coming in, you know? And I said to her, no, actually, I
Mm.
grew up when nobody cared if men wore dresses. There was always blokes who wanted to get into women's underwear and pirouettes around in front of each other. Nobody cared. I certainly had zero interest in what they did. It was none of my business. I cared less than that until whoa, they started wanting to involve children.
Yeah.
Now, aha, no, that is my business. That
Mm.
is my business now. And then these guys, when they start wanting to go into women's toilets, you know, these trans identified, that's my business. When they try to get into women's safe spaces, getting into women's sports, and above all, they want me to pretend that they're women. And
Mm.
they want to control my thoughts and my words. Whoa,
Yeah.
that's very much my business. And that's new. But you ask me where it's come from. It hasn't come from the American far right anyway, that's for
No.
sure. Um, as in Ireland, we've kind of been super liberal. Now we're inclined to give a kind of a nationalist sort of spin to it and say, look how much more progressive we are than the Brits. Oh, they're still very backwards, you know? And you can see it with our television presenters now. Things like when that British Supreme Court ruling came up there back in April, I think it was. There was a presenter on the television here, and she's saying, unfortunately, now change is looming from Britain, you know? And the panel discussion was, of course, a trans identified guy, a trans identified, a pro trans journalist, whatever. And they let it be. The public would really not have quite understood what was being talked about here because they say, well, one of the journalist guy, he says, imagine this means that a trans woman can now be strip searched by a male police officer. Wow! And you kind of, if you weren't kind of having to decode what was saying, it does sound rather shocking. But our television presenters, our journalists are not doing the decoding. Where has
Yeah.
it come from? It's taken over the media, the medical profession. Unfortunately, I think the judiciary, what I've seen of them, they're
Yeah.
far too ready in Ireland to go along with it. Because there was a guy banged up there a few weeks ago, Samantha Otto. Now, his previous offence, he's in the men's prison because he didn't have a GRC. And the judge explained to him, this is difficult because you don't have a GRC. I'm going to have to send you to a men's prison. So her explanation was that bloke was going into a women's prison if he had had a GRC. I
Yeah.
don't quite understand why he doesn't have one. But 5 years ago, when he was in the papers before, woman gets suspended sentence for throwing boiling water in man's face. You know. And this guy, he was stalking a guy he fancied. Typical male behavior. In this case, of a
Yeah.
gay man. When he didn't get his way, he saw the guy in a gambling casino doing out of a one-arm bandit machine. He went into the kitchen, filled a cup of boiling water, yanked the guy's head back, and threw the boiling water in his face. Now,
Shit.
he got a suspended sentence, and our brave media, the Irish Times, which is the main broadsheet, and the Sunday World, the main tabloid, both reported woman gets suspended sentence for attack on man. As you say to me, women doing all these terrible things.
Yeah.
Anyway, Samantha, it didn't actually manage to. Excuse me. Samantha then was a bad girl boy again because sometime later, a couple of years later, while still under the suspended period of the sentence, he sexually assaulted a teenage boy in an alleyway. And this time, the papers couldn't, because when he was holding, he cupped his penis. Well, they couldn't say her penis, his own penis, like, and all. But now, what were the papers going to do? Because this bloke is now up for a sexual assault. A very male
Yeah.
behavior, again, obviously,
Yeah.
you know. So what did the Irish Times do? The paper record ignored the story, and the Sunday World ran the story again because he's very kind of for a tabloid. He's one of these ridiculous looking blokes, in a wig and
Yeah.
everything else. But they ran it and they said that he is a trans-identified man. But they never said, by
Right.
the way, we should have told you 5 years ago she was a woman. But when I say the judiciary, Judge Pauline Codd disturbed me because she said two things. One, I would have sent you to a women's prison. But the second thing she says is, in sentencing, I'm taking account of the difficult time you're going to have in prison because of your trans identity. And that's being taken into account. So that's very, very clear. If a man is facing, a sex offender man or whatever, is facing a sentence, put on a dress and say you're trans, it will reduce your sentence. And we saw the same thing 5, 6 years ago with that paedophile guy. The judge there, he said to him, I'm taking account in your sentence of the fact that you're trans and this will cause particular difficulties for you. And I saw a cartoon somebody put up on X the other day, and it was one bloke looking at the other, said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I'm going from being a sex predator to being a vulnerable minority." And he's putting on wigs and stuff like that. And that is literally true, that what these guys did, the three guys who were in Limerick Prison, the two sex offenders and the guy who beat people up, he mitigated his sentence through becoming a woman, you know, or at least certainly the child abuser did. And this other guy, Samantha, who's now in Mountjoy somewhere, he mitigated his sentence by putting on a wig and all the rest of it. And and say, this isn't my words, this is what the judge said. So I think the judiciary is there. And I watched it in Limerick last year, that the judge, the prosecution, everybody all pretended Barbie was a woman. When there's this man standing there in the court the whole time, and
Yeah.
they're talking about his threats to, or her threats to rape women, you know. And the judiciary just goes along with this. And funny, the copper who was questioning me the other day, and he says, "Well, she was in trouble for this, and she was." I said to him, "I said, you say she, I say he," and he says, "Ah, but Paddy," he says, "I can't put a foot wrong." So what he doesn't want to do is screw up some legal case by using the wrong pronoun. But that's
Yeah.
what the judiciary are enforcing. But I work at the courts a lot, so I do meet a lot of policemen and policewomen, and I've had quite a lot of them come up to me and say, "Keep up the good work," will you?" You know, because
Yeah. I get that. I
so
mean, I've,
like
I've,
the average copper on the street or on the beat hasn't been captured, you know.
yeah, they know it, but they have their equality, diversity, and inclusion training. What they have to do. I had to do it in the fire service. I was outside Graham Linehan's trial, and I was there with my boards on and with my cameras ready.
Oh, that's
And
right. I saw you. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
God,
Graham actually put my boards on just
he
before
did.
he
Yeah,
went
I
in,
saw that.
and the
Yeah,
pictures
yeah.
went viral. And when the person that's accusing Graham of smashing his mobile phone up, it's a man, it's a young
Yeah,
boy, well, a teenager, I think he is,
yeah.
late teens, maybe even early 20s. And a copper come over to me and he said, "Are you gonna? We need you to clear this area because she will be coming out soon." And I went, "She? It's a he." And he was like, I said, "You know, it's a man, right?" And he couldn't say it. I said, "Have you done your equality, diversity, and inclusion training at work?" And he went, "Yes." I said, "I know you can't say it." And
I know we're laughing, but it's tragic, isn't it? It's
it,
really.
it is. And I've had experiences of being attacked and assaulted on the streets. People like to, all these trans rights activists like to throw food products over me. I've been covered in treacle or golden syrup, chili sauce, and soup. Now they've received. Nobody's been sentenced at all yet. I've been waiting for one from Liverpool, where my first attack on Bold Street in Liverpool. It was a premeditated attack because this trans rights activist first come over to me and said, "Excuse me, go fuck yourself." She disappeared. And I say she, I didn't know what if it was a she or a he at the time. Turns out it was a she. She came back, covered me in hot chili sauce, just missed going in my eye. And then when I apprehended her, she smacked me in the face as well. It's all on camera. I've sent all this evidence to Merseyside Police. She's admitted the assault. I just received an email just 2 days ago, and it said she's getting away with a caution. She's been cautioned. That's it. So I was smacked in the face, covered in hot chili sauce, and all she's getting is a caution.
Yeah, I know. And it's one of the things, again, that the media won't touch. But I know you probably said the same as I did for a good few years, is nobody's saying a man in a dress is any more likely to be a threat to women. All we're saying is he doesn't potentially become less of a threat. That's all.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying. But unfortunately, at this stage, I'm finding a lot of empirical evidence that there's a lot of very violent men put on dresses. And it's one of the things that, for example, that Minnesota, again, with Who Killed the
Yeah.
Children, the Times of London had it that in his diary he wrote, "I love my wearing a dress. I think I shall wear this dress for the shooting or a dress like this for shooting." In his mind, there is a connection. And you'd see it like the Charlie Kirk, the shooter.
Yeah.
his boyfriend again. There was all this
Transgender.
trans stuff, and it is. If you go onto their websites, you'll see what they're at. There's a strong, toxic transgender atmosphere of violence. When there was do you know Posey Parker or Kelly J.
Yes,
Keane? Yeah,
Kelly J.
she
Keane.
had 2 years ago in Dublin. She had a Let Women Speak event, and the police, McGarty, they held back all of these protesters. But these protesters were there, megaphones shouting down the women who were trying to speak. They had placards up threatening women with sexual assaults. They're shouting and roaring masked men. And there's a strong element of violence. Like Steve, you and me, we don't go to transgender meetings and try to shout people down or throw things at people or threaten them with rape or whatever. But women here get that. And I'll tell you, Steve, I'm a 68-year-old man with only one working arm. But by God, if one of those guys tried to come near any of those women trying to speak,
Yeah.
I would give those transgender women such a kick in the balls because that's what men do, you know. And I would absolutely, because good men defend women, you know.
Yeah,
That,
absolutely.
whoa, but it's the violence. And I heard it like on my old station again, RTÉ, journalist interviewing somebody about this digital media control stuff, saying, what about toxic masculinity? He asks. How can we control toxic masculinity? Okay, whatever that is, I'm sure
Yeah.
it's very bad. But like, we are not allowed to talk about the routine threats of sexualized violence that you find on these transgender sites. And guys like that Minnesota shooter, guys like the guy who killed Charlie Kirk, all of these people are swimming in those waters all the time. And it should be perfectly legitimate for journalists to look at this and say, you know, what is going on here? I saw it, for example. I went to it was my old company RTE did dip its toes or took a good swim in this 3 years ago with a phone-in program called Liveline. They ended up in huge amounts of trouble and have never touched it since. But the transgender lot had a march in through Dublin City because they've been wounded and endangered so much by people saying the wrong things on the radio. And one of them said he likened that radio program to an incident 2 months earlier in which two gay men had been decapitated by a bloke who met them on Grinder in the town of Sligo. Now, that bloke, that was in April of 2022, and a third guy was mutilated as well. But these horrific murders and mutilations took place, and he was. Now, RTE saying the wrong thing in their mind, somebody was allowed to come on and say, look, I really don't think girls should be in boys or boys should be in girls' football teams, you know? That's the same in their mind as stabbing somebody to death, decapitating them, you know? That they can't, words of violence to them. So, like, it just as it goes, if they feel that it's like being stabbed, if I say the wrong thing to them, they can feel the same way back. And they are in that toxic, violent atmosphere is far too much of it there all the time. Now, the bloke who killed the two gay men, he was from a Muslim immigrant family, a young man who no doubt had been exposed to an awful lot of the hateful teachings of that Islam includes about gay people. No, nobody ever touches that. That was ruled out of order, most of all by the LGBT people themselves. But if somebody on the media was actually responsible for the killing of those two gay men, it was journalists or it was a radio station that allowed a diversity of views. Anyway, RTE, my old company, took its scolding and took its correction, and it has never ever touched the damn thing ever since. So, which is why, of course, it's migrated online. The whole
Yeah.
thing has migrated online. And so, like, I'll go out walking my dog in a while. There's my doggy there, by the way. There she is. There you are, Bailey. People talk to you when you have a dog. And
Yeah.
people, the real world, people will chat to you. I mean, they're chatting to me now about Barbie because, you know, a lot of people have seen that. But people I know. And I was in my local pub there a few weeks ago up the road here. And there was, it was a Sunday night, busy, got through up to the bar, and there's two elderly men sitting at the bar, and I overhear one saying to the other, and I think Graham Lenihan is right. Now, in an Irish pub, in Irish culture, it's not rude to talk to a stranger, you know?
Yeah.
So I was able to say, hello, man, I just heard you saying that. I think Graham Lennon is right too. Well, put it there, boy. And the three of us shake hands.
Brilliant.
And like, all right, alcohol lowers people's inhibitions, but
Yeah.
that's in the real world. We're three elderly Irish gentlemen who think that men who go into women's sports are cheats and men who want to get into women's toilets are creeps, you know, because that is the way
cheats.
we are.
That's good. Cheats and creeps. I'm going
Cheats
to
and
use that.
creeps, they are. Yeah. Now, we didn't go into anything like the puberty blockers and all of that because, in a way, that hasn't gone through to public consciousness, you know. But Graham Lenihan's arrest, I'm sorry to say, actually did propel it into public consciousness, even though our media tried to memory hole it. Just the same, it's been talked about, just like Barbie has got through into public consciousness. So, despite the best effort of the media to control what people are allowed to know, people do know what they care about. So, you're more likely to have a discussion at the bar of a pub about what matters to people, or out walking your dog chatting, than you will on our media, which is very sad.
It's crazy, and I tell you what, that was something that I didn't anticipate when I started going out on the streets with my boards. Was the great conversations I'd be having with everyday members of the public, which I'd kind of like, it had stopped happening, you know, ever since the COVID days and things. People weren't going out and mixing as much. But I get out on the streets and speak to people. I mean, a lot of people that follow my channel, they do like to see, some of them just want the entertainment value. They want to see people giving me grief and me being attacked by Antifa, and that's what gets all the views. That's great. But what I'm trying to do is educate people as well. And having these conversations on the street, the majority of people agree, but they're too afraid to speak about it openly in public because they're afraid of losing the job. This is how powerful this agenda is.
It is. But like, journalists are meant to have a bit of courage. You know, I mean, why be a journalist at all if you're not going to stand up for? When I say about, you're either punching down, and I mean that literally, with that woman on the ground, a 60-year-old woman being punched down upon by this powerfully built man with a wig. I mean, whose side are you on there? And unfortunately, the journalists have decided to go on the side of keeping that man there. You know, why be a journalist at all if you're going to do that? So the journalist profession has disgraced itself in my eyes, and people rightly are contemptuous now of it. But you're right, when people are out there, you see, I used to do it with my work, but in podcasting, like, I've actually made podcasts out walking the dog, and they call it dog walking, conversations you have.
Right.
So I spend my life really conversing with strangers, and it's a thing I enjoy, and it's a thing I seem to be good at. I have this unusual sort of half English accent because of my London childhood, and people have to say, God, how would you get people to open up to you? I know, because people just do. And,
well, I mean, it was the first time that I've come across you listening to that podcast that you did outside the prison, and it was shared massively and extensively all over Twitter. And it was, you just have this way of, you know, you were very bold in asking your questions, but you've got kind of like a real soft voice, and it's non-threatening, and it just worked perfect with Barbie Kardashian because he just said everything. And when he was saying these really extreme things, you were following up with questions and said, you know, do you not see that as a problem? And it just made him open up more and more and more.
Terribly forward, isn't he? There, you know. But I enjoyed it. Like that telly program I made in Manchester, we stood outside Fred Doan's, I remember, just talking to guys, old guys who'd left Ireland in the 1950s and that, and they told their story of Ireland and why they had settled in Britain. Often they were from poor families. They were from families that weren't maybe highly esteemed where they were. But Manchester, I find vox popping so subversive because people say all the wrong things. If I'd gone through the Irish and Manchester representation group, I would have heard about the need for more social workers and whatever. But you get a completely different story from the ground up. I found it fascinating, and I've always loved doing that. You know. So must get back to Manchester again. It's a good city.
Absolutely. Well, be sure to contact me if you do come over again, and we can meet up. That'd be fantastic. We're closing in on an hour now. Shall we wrap it up now?
Sure. Yeah. I have to go and collect my grandkids from school in another half hour.
No worries. So just tell us where people can find you again on all your social medias and all your podcasts and things.
Well, the podcast is called paddyspodcast.ie. Sorry, there's a sign up in it at the moment saying not secure, and that's something to do with some license I've got to renew. I'm going to see about that today.
Okay.
But like, nobody's looking for money, so don't worry about it. You know, it is completely safe. You're not going to be. But I'm going to rectify that hopefully today. And I'm on Twitter as at Paddy J O'Gorman. But Paddy's podcast, it's an audio podcast.
Yeah.
But if you go to the website of Spiked, who I write for sometimes, they have a different worldview to me, but they will take things that other people
Yeah.
won't. So I'm very pleased. I'm all for diversity of opinion. And they put up some of the video I took of it because it occurred to me suddenly while I was there doing audio with Barbie. Said, "Geez, I better get some pictures of this guy." So I ended up with one hand
Yeah.
with my recorder, and then with the other hand my phone. You know, so because in a way he is a visual story as well.
Absolutely.
He's in Dublin now, and I said to him, "Would you not at least take off the makeup when you're in Dublin?" I'm worried for him, and he has taken off the makeup. And without the makeup, he doesn't look so noticeable. I mean, he's just a bloke, you know.
Yeah.
Although I saw social media shots of him still wearing these ludicrous false boobs. You know?
I know they're out there, aren't they?
Oh, for God's sake, you know. I mean, who told him this is a woman? You know.
It's just a caricature of a woman, isn't it? So what I will do down in the description to this video, I will put all the links to your podcast and your social media.
Podcast.ie. That's it.
Yeah.
And not Paddy J O'Gorman. I don't use TikTok and all that. Maybe I should. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I went out and got a TikTok channel purely because it's a way of reaching and getting the message out to younger people.
Right. Okay. And can you do lengthy stuff on TikTok? Can you?
I'm not quite sure. It's generally shorts, but what you can do, you can actually get some software. There's a website called Opus Clip, OPUSCLIP, and what you do is you take your long form videos, upload it to Opus Clip, and it makes a series of shorts for you, and you just upload it.
Very good. All right, I should do that then. I should do
Check that out.
Okay.
Yeah, it's worth doing. Well,
You're
Paddy,
a brave man, Steve. You know, you're a very brave man going out there with your billboards.
you may not have seen, but I was out in Blackpool yesterday. That video I was out in Blackpool. We're Monday now. I was out in Blackpool on Saturday. I posted the video yesterday. It's in terms of the videos and the views that I get, it's gone viral. And I was in Blackpool's gay area because I came across a Pride Progress flag where it should be a zebra crossing on the floor. So I thought I wanted to go outside Blackpool Tower, but I thought I'm gonna stand near this progress flag on the floor, and it was a gay area, and I was right next to a gay bar, and they'd been drinking in there, and they all came out, and it was almost like a pile-on. It was just me with all these people getting angry, want to beat me up.
It was 30 years ago. My wife's a Dubliner, and she said to me, "There's a strong Dublin working class tradition about going to Blackpool during the Illuminations."
Yeah.
And sure enough, there was so I went over there with her for a few days. I made a radio doc, and it was Dublin accents for the most part among the Irish people, but about what Blackpool meant to them, and it was great fun. It was really interesting. I think it was before trans pride had gone so aggressive, you know,
right?
People
Of course.
know, and it was a happy place, an interesting place, and very good. I'd love to have made a television doc there. Actually, I should have done. You know,
you should go back there. There.
It's kind of an older, our people in Ireland. Obviously, we go on our holidays now to Spain and whatever. But going right back, there was a Dublin tradition, a Dublin working class tradition of Blackpool being the go-to place. You know, and people loved the dancing and all of that. And as far as I know, that's still there. During the Illuminations is the particular time. You know. So,
and they just started. I think they opened this weekend.
Did they indeed?
Yeah. So as the nights are starting to close in now, they've started the Illuminations. Yeah.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah. You're tempting me now. I'm nostalgic, you know.
Well, if you do come over, let me know and we'll meet up. It'd be nice,
I'd love
to meet you.
I'd love to, Steve. Yeah, we'll meet down in Stockport. Okay.
Yeah. Fantastic.
It was opposite Stockport, Nick. You know, opposite the police station. I remember.
Right. Okay. I know that. That's now apartments.
Is it all right? Okay. Yeah. That's. But I remember being down there in a big pub. That wasn't actually. That was a different one. That was a different pub. I can't remember the name of it now. You know, but I was in the pub and the bookies and whatever, and it was fun. It was fun, and a lot of history there, a lot of human experience. You know.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time, Paddy. It's been an
You're
absolute pleasure
welcome.
chatting to you.
You're welcome, Steve. Really good
Yeah.
talking to you.
Let's do this again soon. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye. Let me. I can't find the.
Say bye-bye, Neil.
There we go. Bye-bye,
There you
dog.
go.
I've got two
Cheers.
screens and my cursor was on the other screen. Boom. That should be